Now on the Georgia Vote.
Today's message is maximum pressure.
Senator Jon Ossoff pays a visit to a controversial U.S. Postal Service facility. What he thinks about the agency's effort to get mail delivery back on track.
Also,
my last experience didn't go how I wanted, and so it's a much more difficult decision to make personally.
Former State Senator Jason Carter, grandson of the former president, working to score Democratic wins in 2024, but keeping an eye on 2026. We'll share if he's eyeing a return to the Gold Dome.
Plus, conservative talk show host Shelley Winter and political strategist Humberto Garcia Shugrim join us in our roundtable, all right now on the Georgia Vote.
From the 11 Alive studios, this is the Georgia Vote with Faith Jesse and Zach Merchant.
Well, good morning and welcome to the Georgia Vote. We began with a historic and stunning week in American politics.
A verdict that shocked the nation. Donald Trump, former president of the United States, guilty of all 34 felony counts in his criminal hush money trial. The day after the verdict, the former president and presumptive Republican nominee repeated his claims that the case was stacked against him.
It was a rigged trial. We wanted a venue change where we could have a fair trial. We didn't get it. We wanted a judge change. We wanted a judge that wasn't conflicted. And obviously he didn't do that. Nobody's ever seen anything like it.
One of the big questions here in Georgia now is how that New York verdict could impact the ongoing Fulton County election interference case against former President Trump. I took that question to veteran Atlanta defense attorney Bob Rubin.
So it doesn't impact the case itself that the prosecution is trying to bring or the defense that the defense lawyers are bringing. It could impact and probably will impact jury selection.
Which was already going to be a challenge, many experts said, here in Atlanta.
Yes. So if you ask the jurors, as you generally would, who here is familiar with the case, this case in Fulton, 90% will raise their hand, if not more. Now you're asking the question, who here is familiar with the fact that Donald Trump has already been convicted of a crime? Everybody's going to be familiar with that. I mean, it's the biggest headline on the newspaper today. So that's going to impact how people feel about Donald Trump.
Which, if I'm hearing you correctly, in turn would make it even more difficult to seat an impartial jury.
Correct. I think it does impact a person's ability to look at this defendant fairly and impartially.
The verdict brought reaction from all sides of Georgia's political spectrum. Head over to the 11 Alive website at 11alive.com. Look for the politics section to see all of those perspectives. And now the latest on another big story we have been following here. Senator Jon Ossoff went straight to the source as he demands answers about mail delays impacting people all over Georgia.
That's right. He toured Palmetto's regional mail processing facility, something we've asked to do repeatedly in the months we've been reporting on these issues, but we were not allowed inside. Ossoff said that he was specifically looking into the delays in prescriptions and absentee ballots. He said he didn't see any obvious signs of problems inside, but he knows that work was done to get this facility ready for his visit. The senator also stressed where fault should lie for the lack of efficiency within the Palmetto site.
This is not on postal workers. Postal workers have tough jobs. This is a question of management.
Senator Ossoff says the local and regional staff he talked with told him they are going to reach their mid-June deadline to restore on-time delivery.
If you're dealing with USPS problems at home or at work, let us know. You can email us at postalproblems@11alive.com.
Well, members of the Biden administration, they continue to tout what they feel is progress during the president's term. In his most recent visit to Atlanta, Tom Perez, senior advisor to the president, sat down with me, and I asked him about the doubt some may be feeling surrounding those accomplishments. What is the Biden administration doing to speak to those people who are not excited about him, that look at him and say, I don't think I want you as my president?
Well, we talk about the facts. We talk about what we're trying to do. When Joe Biden took over in 2021, we were in the throes of a pandemic. We had so much loss of life. We had a pandemic-induced recession. We were 2 weeks removed from just an unconscionable insurrection. We had so much to do, and now you look, these investments in the American Rescue Plan. We brought America back. We are the strongest economy in the world. You know, our unemployment rate has been under 4% now for over 2 years. That's the longest streak in 50 years. You look at the black unemployment rate. The disparity between the black and white unemployment rate is as low as it has been in many, many years. And so the president's focus on not simply putting people to work, but making sure we have an equity agenda so that the black community sees that historic discrimination that has set the community back, and Latinos and other communities of color. The whole initiative to reconnect communities, to invest in communities that have been, frankly, left behind, is a big part of what the president is doing.
Again, this was during Perez's most recent visit to Atlanta. This was back in April. And while so much has changed in this election cycle in recent weeks, it does offer a vital snapshot at the administration's approach to this campaign. You can find this full conversation on 11alive.com. And still ahead, we ask former state Senator Jason Carter if he is making plans for 2026 and a possible run for an office his iconic grandfather once held.
And later, we catch up with one of Georgia's first Latino state lawmakers, find out how he's now tasting the fruits of a different profession and what he wants to see from this year's election.
Right now, most of the attention in the world of politics is focused on November.
But even with a major presidential race looming, there is already some buzz building about potential candidates for Senate and governor all the way out in 2026. Jason Carter, grandson of former President Jimmy Carter, is no stranger to campaigns himself. He served in the Georgia Senate before running unsuccessfully for governor in 2014. In this week's Sunday Conversation, I ask him about a potential return to politics and his family's legacy.
Over those many decades of Carter family involvement in Georgia politics, how do you think Georgia politics have changed?
So, you know, first of all, I ran for governor 10 years ago, and I feel like a dinosaur now, right? I mean, it was a different political era. So much has changed, you know, since through the 2016 election and beyond. But really, even then, when my grandfather and I would talk, when he ran for governor, he lost in 1966 and ran again in 1970. And he told me that in that interim 4 years, he shook 600,000 hands. Right? Just saw people where they were, met them, said, "Hi, I'm Jimmy Carter." And that kind of just, even if it's fleeting, that little personal connection was real. And today, our politics is so driven by fundraisers and donors and, you know, this like isolated candidates who are dealing with social media and other things, that the biggest fear that I have, and I even felt it when I was running 10 years ago, is that candidates just get isolated from regular people. It's hard to be a candidate and not be isolated from the people that you're really trying to serve.
Do you think it's hard to be a voter now, too, because of that?
Well, I think voters honestly are looking out and saying, who is it that I can trust to do the work and to not lose touch with me? And I think that's a difficult thing for voters. And I think you see the mistrust in our institutions and other things. But the best politicians and the best people that I appreciate the most are the ones that are able to rebuild that connection.
Do you see a world where you could be re-entering Georgia politics for that 2026 race?
I don't know. I mean, I really am right now, to the extent I'm re-entering politics, it's the campaign for Joe Biden, right? I mean, my party in Georgia, the Democrats, have excellent leadership, and I'm personally super focused on this 2024 election because I think it's such a big deal. But having run before, it's a tough choice for your family. It's a tough choice for a host of other things. But, you know, I think you'll see a lot of people sit down and think about it over the next couple of years. But I think that people that I talk to are hyper-focused on this 2024 election.
But if I'm hearing you right, and correct me if I'm wrong, at least at this point, you are saying you're not ruling out a run in 2026 for either Senate or governor.
Well, no, I mean, we have a great senator right now. I'm definitely not doing that. I have no desire to go to Washington, D.C., and we'll probably have great candidates for governor. But, yeah, I'm not ruling it out. But also, like I said before, my last experience didn't go how I wanted, and so it's a much more difficult decision to make personally. And also, it's important to see what the world looks like and how we're all bringing things together, and whether we have the kind of candidates that are going to connect with people and do the work that needs to get done.
As we look at this 2024 election, it's a big contest, and it's a rematch between former President Trump and President Biden. You mentioned you're a strong supporter of sitting President Biden. Does your grandfather, Jimmy Carter, intend to endorse a candidate in this race?
He's not really in a position right now where I think he's going to be endorsing. I will tell you who he's going to vote for. I'm confident is, if he is able, is Joe Biden. Right? I mean, they've been close friends for a very, very long time, and I think when you look at this election now, we are all talking about poll numbers and this and that, but really, I think when we get to the fundamentals, by the time we get to November, you're going to see an economic record from Biden. You're going to see a real record on so many other issues, and you're going to compare that to Trump's record, and those voters that right now are sort of not feeling the vibes maybe around Biden, I think are going to come back, and I think the people who voted to fire Donald Trump last time are going to be there to support Biden this time, including, by the way, my grandfather and me.
It is worth noting that Jason Carter is not the only Georgian to discuss a potential 2026 campaign with us. Just a few weeks ago, right here on the Georgia Vote, Savannah Republican Congressman Buddy Carter said he's considering a run for Senate. To be clear, neither of them has, at least as of right now, outright committed to a campaign, but at the very least right now, I think it's safe to say it is starting to feel like 2026 is really not that far away, Faith.
It's not that far, and given that his grandfather was governor and then president, maybe he could be following in those same footsteps.
A lot of history there.
Trying to. Still ahead, we hear from the voice of the voter. But first, Shelley Winter and Humberto Garcia-Shugrum discuss this week's top political headlines in our roundtable. You're watching the Georgia Vote. Time now for our political roundtable. Today we have Shelley Winter, conservative talk show host, heard weeknights from 7 to 9 on WSB Radio and a member of the Georgia Black Republican Council. And Humberto Garcia-Shugrum. He is the co-founder and chair of Palante, Georgia, a organization that recruits, trains, and supports Latinos running for office. Previously, he was within the corporate structure of Coca-Cola and has worked for several other global corporations. Gentlemen, thanks so much for being here and welcome to panel.
Thank you.
We're so grateful to have you both here. Humberto, let's start with you. Your organization, Palante, recruits Latino candidates to run for office. We just heard from Jason Carter, the grandson of former President Jimmy Carter. He didn't say he was running for governor in 2026. He also didn't say he's not running. Is campaign season getting earlier and earlier now?
You know, I think we're in constant campaign season, and particularly for us, our focus is on local candidates. That means school board, city council, state legislature, and obviously those happen in different years. So we're working on this day in and day out, and we're talking to people every day, every year.
And are candidates that your organization talked to, are they excited about that? Are they fired up to go and campaign, or is there some sense of, oh my gosh, this is more than I anticipated?
You know, we're starting several steps further back, because the reality is, let me give you a quick stat. There are over 7,000 appointed or elected officials in Georgia. Latinos represent 10% of the population. So in theory, there'd be 700 Latinos in office. I'm not going to ask you to guess, but there are less than 30 that we know of. So less than 1/2 of 1% for 10%, representing 10% of the population. We've got a long way to go, and so what we're trying, that's why we exist. We need to go out and recruit, engage, support, give them a reason to want to run, but also let them know that someone's going to help them.
Well, gentlemen, I want to switch gears here and talk about the former president. We know that he was found guilty on all 34 felony counts against him in this hush money trial up in New York. Shelley, when this verdict came out, you said something that stuck with me. You said that the Democrats just lost the White House. A lot of Republicans have seen this case as political. Why do you think this?
Why do I think they see it as political?
No, why do you think that the Democrats just lost the White House?
Because a lot of Republicans see this as political. Also because I'm looking at everything that's transpired since the verdict came down. Trump has raised $34.8 million in 24 hours. That's money raised. 29.7% of that has come from new donors. These are not new donors to the Trump campaign. These are people who never donated to a political campaign in their lives.
That's data, not to interrupt, just for clarity, that's information that the campaign is self-reported.
It came from WinRed. It's quoted from the campaign, but it's confirmed from WinRed. But you also see the polling, minority voters moving towards Trump, Latino voters moving towards Trump, young voters being turned off by Biden. Biden just had a press conference just a couple minutes before I came here where he's talking about everything that's going on that he's doing for Gaza and the Gazan people and the Palestinian people. That's all to bring back those young voters to his camp. So I think that yesterday a lot of people saw it as a politically rigged case, as Trump keeps saying, and I think a lot of people, particularly independents, are seeing it as saying, yeah, you know what, if this is kind of crazy what's going on, 34 counts of business record falsification, that's kind of crazy, and I think that's why a lot of people are gravitating towards him.
And it's interesting that you hit on the campaign, the donors, because we saw something similar. Zach and I were on the desk for hours when the Fulton County indictments came out. When that mugshot came out, that was his first tweet after he came back to Twitter for so long. It was a link to a campaign, right? So do you think that, I mean, is this the strategy now? I mean, he has several other cases that could potentially go to trial.
Absolutely. It absolutely is a strategy. You martyr yourself. If your opponent is going to make a martyr out of you, you take that position and you run on it, and you run strongly on it, and you make yourself the unfairly treated victim of everything that's going on, and people will start to gravitate towards you because a lot of people in this country, particularly the quote-unquote downtrodden, see themselves in a guy who is a billionaire that everyone loved in 2015, then all of a sudden everyone who was his friend hated him in 2016, all because he ran as a Republican. They're looking at that and they're saying to themselves, I see myself in him in many ways.
I want to turn just ever so slightly here and bring you in, Umberto. Poll experts, pollsters will say that a snap poll is useful, but especially in big news events, you get a better, more accurate sense after some time has passed, after multiple days have passed. We are still in the early days following this verdict, and particularly here in Georgia, Umberto, Latino voters in this state have emerged as a really important and sought-after group of voters by both the Biden and the Trump campaigns. Do you think that when those candidates and their campaigns are in Georgia, when they're trying to speak to Latino voters, do you think they're reaching them effectively?
No, not at all. And it's not just those candidates. I mean, you could, across the board, and right down to the school board level, Latinos are not being effectively engaged by political candidates in Georgia or coming from outside of Georgia to Georgia. While the Latino electorate is growing, and it's significant now. There are about 400,000 registered Latinos in Georgia. It's still not registering. That's going to change very soon, because the average Latino is 26 years old. The average Georgian is 36 years old. And so as our young, in fact, over 20% of Latinos are 0 to 10 years old. As our young Latinos turn 18 and beyond and start to show up to vote, I don't know how they're going to vote, unlike my friend Shelley, who seems to know who folks are going to vote. I have no clue who they're going to vote for. But the vote's going to matter more and more.
Still a lot to unpack and a lot to be seen as this election continues to move forward. We love to talk more. We've got to wrap it up right now. After the break, we head to a vineyard in Lumpkin County for this week's Voice of the Voter, one who shares how Georgia's politics have changed since his time as a state legislator. Each week, we go to where you are to hear in your own words what matters most to you. This week, our Voice of the Voter is in Lumpkin County. We go to Dog Hobble Wine Farm in Dahlonega to sit down with Sam Zamaripa, a business executive, a vineyard operator, and one-time state senator who has seen many changes within Georgia politics.
These things grow 6 to 8 inches a day sometimes. And, in a big spurt, it'll go just like that.
So obviously this is one section of Dog Hobble Wine Farm.
One section
here,
yeah.
But the actual property much larger, right?
Yeah, so we live on 80 acres here that goes from this ridge line all the way down into a valley and a creek bed and all the way up and over 2 mountain ridges. My father's from Mexico, and I grew up with a Mexican-American identity. A lot of political people simply just say, well, Latinos are interested in this, and this is what I'm going to sell them. And I think that's where the mistake is. You know, just saying hola is not enough. You've got to understand the transition of people, the assimilation of people from immigrant status all the way into sort of the blended American like me.
You served in the Georgia State Legislature.
Yeah.
Now you run a vineyard.
Yeah.
Those are very different jobs.
They're different, but the good thing is that if I do my job well here, I'll sell my wine and people will enjoy it. In politics, it was hard to do a good job and for people to enjoy what you did.
When you look ahead to the November election this year, what worries you?
You know, all the issues that are in the news or top of mind, a lot of those issues are not new. It's just today they seem to have a little more tension in them. And when I think about what really worries me more than the issues, it's cynicism. It's the idea that we've reached a point where we can't believe in anything or trust anything. It's easier to be cynical than it is to be productive or to contribute or to resolve something.
What are the 2 biggest issues that are going to govern how you vote?
I'm very interested in women's rights, reproductive rights. I'm very interested in a good resolution towards immigration. I'm very interested in our energy policy. I'm very interested in our global policies and the wars in Ukraine and the Middle East. But I don't think about the election as voting for one resolution of those things or another. I really am voting for character and moderation because I don't think there is a slogan answer to any of those problems I've just mentioned.
We always end on this. What are you optimistic about?
You know, I'm optimistic about smart people. I'm even optimistic about our exploration of space right now because I think those things raise different questions. You know, the Hubble telescope that showed us those pictures recently, I think that if you're a thinking person, if you're a philosophical person, and you look at those photographs, you go, wow, are we asking all the right questions?
And you heard Sam talk about his background. His Latino heritage is a big part of his life, but he stressed no voter, nobody is a monolith.
That's right. Zach, thank you so much. An incredible conversation. And we want to thank you all so much for joining us today. We hope to see you back here next Sunday for another edition of the Georgia Vote.